Kia ora, I'm Suitaoloa Simon Young and this is One Ancestor at a Time. Today our story begins in the place that was once the centre of the civilised world, London, England. This is the story of the man who never gave up, my grandfather Lamont Arthur Lind Young. To me as a child he was a very British old man that came visiting once every year or two. A little like Sir David Attenborough to look at and to listen to. Grandpa and Nana wrote their birthday cards to Master Simon Young, a common way of addressing a boy child formally in the olden days, although it sounds a little odd these days. It was long after his passing that I really met my grandfather Young through his story, and that's what I want to share today. Born in Fulham, London in 1906, Lamont, or Monty as he was to be known, was the eldest son of Charles Young, a Royal Navy lieutenant, and Margaret Young, known as Daisy. Monty's sister Olive, or Noni as she was known, was born a year later. In 1910 followed younger brother James, or Jimmy, and the youngest, David, the only one who seems to have no nickname, was born in 1912. In 1914, the world changed. An assassination in Serbia set off a chain of events that saw all European nations entering a state of war and dragging the world with them into World War I. Charles, now a retired lieutenant commander, was recalled to the Royal Navy and in early 1915 sent to Turkey to begin the Dardanelles campaign. We shall learn more of what happened to Charles in a future episode, but here's a spoiler: the campaign didn't end well. Charles was injured in the sinking of the ship Irresistible and was eventually invalided out of the Navy. Life for the Young family could not have been easy. Some family stories talk of growing up with very little money. However, soon enough was the beginning of the roaring 20s and surprising opportunities were about to present themselves. Monty first followed his father's footsteps, joining the Navy as a cadet. It's at this point that the family narratives diverge a little. Those who liked Monty say he was thrown overboard as part of a cruel initiation ritual. Those who didn't get on so well with Monty say he was thrown overboard for insubordination. Regardless of the reason, the result was a lifelong condition of emphysema that made him unsuitable for naval service. Meanwhile, halfway across the world, decisions were being made which were to change the lives of the entire Young family, especially Monty. And it all started with wool. During the war, New Zealand's wool exports were protected by the Royal Navy, the Mercantile Marine and the fishing fleet. After the war, the sheep owners of New Zealand wanted to show their appreciation and gratitude to those forces and specifically the families of those who lost their lives or livelihoods during the war. So in 1920, the New Zealand Sheep Owners Acknowledgement of Debt to British Seamen Fund was established. I know, could the name be any more catchy? At first, the fund made charitable donations to families back home in England, but after a while, an idea took shape. Many of the children of killed or injured servicemen were approaching working age, and at the same time, the sheep farming industry in New Zealand had a skill shortage. So in 1923, a homestead with roughly 8,000 acres of both farmed and unimproved land was purchased by the fund and became Flock House. In May 1924, at the age of just 17, Monty boarded the SS Remuera from Southampton to Auckland. The Remuera was named after the fancy Auckland suburb, but Monty was to go to the untamed back blocks of Aotearoa. I cannot imagine how he must have felt. The photo of Draft 1 of Flock House in July 1924 has numbers on each student. I'm not sure exactly what they mean, but Monty is number 1. Draft 1, number 1. To me, it means he was not afraid to be the first to try something new. As I said, Monty arrived from the rapidly technologising streets of England to the paddocks and bush of bulls in the Rangitikei district. The shock must have been real, but I also reflect on this. In terms of language, culture and infrastructure, Monty was moving into a world that had been created just for him. This is one of the themes I want to cover in this video series, not just to learn about my ancestors, but about their times. At this time, the British Empire was a reality, and New Zealand was most certainly a part of it. I'll dive into this topic more deeply in a future video. The following year, younger brother James arrived at Flock House, and youngest brother David arrived in 1927. Meanwhile, sister Noni made her own way, earning her fare by being a nanny to the children of a well-known politician. Perhaps she missed out on Shalimar, or Girls' Flockhouse, which opened in 1926 because she was just 1 year too old. Life at Flockhouse was hard. Speaking as a child of the suburbs, I've heard that farming is hard work, and believe me, I believe it. But it's even harder creating a farm from scratch. But that was exactly what Flockhouse was for, to teach its students how to create a farm from so-called unimproved land. No doubt these were very formative years for the three brothers. At some stage, Commander Young and Daisy also made their way to Aotearoa because by 1928, Commander Young is sending letters from an address in Silverstream, Lower Hutt. In the 1930s, like the rest of the world, New Zealand enters the Great Depression. After the roaring 20s, jobs and money is now hard to come by, and Monty and his brothers joined the government's work plans, including providing labour to build the Wellington railway station. It's hard to know the psychological toll this took on the family. I know from an anecdote that Jimmy, or Uncle James as I knew him, had a habit for the rest of his life of carrying food in his pockets wherever he went. It was my aunt's theory that he did this because during the Depression, he nearly starved to death. Now in his late 20s, Monty was a confident young man as evidenced by his photos. In 1933, he met and fell in love with a young lady above his station, Edith Dallimore, 6 years his junior, daughter of a well-respected lawyer. Given the dire times they lived in, Monty did the only thing he could. He and Edith eloped, getting married secretly in October 1933 in the Presbyterian manse in Upper Hutt. Their marriage certificate lists his occupation then as carpenter. In around 1937, most of the rest of the Young family returned home to England, and Monty and Edith moved to the small railway town of Te Kuiti in the King Country. At the time, he was working as an insurance salesman, but he wasn't very good at it. He was tasked with selling insurance to the large staff at the biggest employer in the area, the Land Development Office, responsible for helping bankrupt farmers get back onto their farms and helping local Māori develop their land into farms. Monty sold zero insurance, but the boss took pity on him and arranged a job for him in the Land Development Office. It was there that Monty began learning accounting, a task which would take him many more years than he anticipated. And by the way, around this time several not insignificant events happened. Monty and Edith, or Dee as she became known, sorry, I know everyone has a nickname, they had 6 children, born between 1936 and 1946. My dad Graham was the oldest boy, born in 1938. And there was also, what else? Oh, World War II. And like my other granddad, Monty served in the Home Guard, perhaps exempted from overseas service because of his health or his many young children. In a letter to my dad when Dad was 38, Monty reminisces. I was 38 in 1944, just recovering from a radical mastoid operation and studying madly for Merck Law Stage 2 bookkeeping and company law. If I had known at that time that I had 5 more years of study before getting my ticket, I think I might have given it up. But now, of course, I'm quite glad that I stuck to it. However, get his ticket he did in 1949, and in 1954, Monty opened his own accounting business at the age of 48, which, by the way, is the age I am now. Monty arrived in New Zealand 100 years ago. He opened his business 70 years ago, and it was 20 years ago that I received the family tree that got me started on this family history quest. But the occasion for that family reunion was my uncle's exit from the same business 50 years after it begun. It changed names many times over the years, but the practice is the same one that my grandfather began after his many years of study. Monty asked all of his children to join him and make it a family business. All of them refused until the youngest uncle, the only one left, was the one who joined up and carried on that business into the 21st century. At the time of my uncle's farewell, things were hard for us, and our business at the time was really struggling. As I heard my grandfather's story of struggle again and again to pass his accountancy papers, to progress from employment to self-employment, to running a thriving practice, to becoming a pillar of that small town, it gave me strength to do the unthinkable for me at the time. To me, it doesn't matter what the move or the change is, it's the courage to make that move that you know is the right one. It's often the hardest one. And I'm so thankful to Monty for that lesson. Of course, the Monty I knew was an older man. By that time, everyone knew him as Bard because of his habit of humming music like Barum, barum, barum. It has been said that I've inherited pomposity from my grandfather, but I couldn't possibly comment. Being English, Bard was never a demonstratively affectionate man. His letter to my father is disjointed and stilted in parts, but he showed care in his own way. After my father died, Bard paid for us to visit Dad's brother in Papua New Guinea. He made sure that we kept getting the magazine subscriptions that Dad used to bring home for free from work. Reader's Digest, National Geographic, these all contributed to that rich childhood I mentioned. Not financially rich, but rich in knowledge and context and fodder for curiosity. If Monty was alive today, I have no doubt he would be on YouTube or even TikTok. For his time, he was mad keen on media technology, as was his brother James. As soon as tape recorders were invented, they had them. Monty also loved photos, including this amazing selfie taken sometime in the 70s. And don't tell anyone this, but I suspect I may have inherited from Monty a certain flair for the dramatic. Monty and Edith, or Bard and Mother as everyone had come to know them by then, both developed dementia in the mid-1980s. Then in April 1986, at the age of 79, Monty passed away. Edith's journey with dementia would last longer, and she died in August 1990. From Southampton to the back blocks of Bulls, to marrying up, to the arduous attempts at accountancy, to raising 6 kids and eventually becoming a pillar of the community, I remember Bard as the man who never gave up, and L.A.L Young as the woman who stood by his side. Let's not forget the siblings. David returned home with his parents, served in the Second World War, married and had children. Various of my uncles travelled to the UK and kept up with the family, and thanks to the wonders of social media, I was privileged to have an online chat with the descendants of David just last year. I was so pleased to hear that in the back garden of the family home in Hampshire is a little memory of Aotearoa, a small garden shed labelled Whare, the Māori name for house. Noni was a regular traveller between the UK and New Zealand. I always remembered her as a lovely great aunt. She never married, and nor did her brother James, who was also somewhat of a world traveller and eccentric to boot. In fact, as a child, I'd heard so much about Uncle James before meeting him that I assumed he must be a made-up character until I met him. Like his brother Monty, James was very enthusiastic about media, always taking tape recordings and photos. His photographic subjects were not always delighted with his work. Here's a banger he took of me, my mother and my sister. Nice work, Uncle James. 100 years after Monty stepped off the SS Remuera, what has changed and what's the same? Wool is no longer New Zealand's largest export. In fact, the industry is now propped up by government subsidies. We're most definitely not in the roaring 20s now. In fact, in many ways, the times we live in have more in common with the Great Depression. The sun has well and truly set on the British Empire, or has it? The political structure has gone, yes, but the shadows linger. My grandfather set foot into a world made for him, and as his descendant I enjoy the same privilege, and it most certainly is a privilege, to have my native language and culture embedded in the law, media, culture and physical environment of this land. I'm so aware of this because I've spent so much time with people of other cultures trying to come to grips with this peculiar British culture. It's a privilege that I don't take lightly. I didn't come by it fairly, so I have a responsibility to use that privilege wisely and compassionately. I'm sure any reasonable person would agree. And Flock House? It became a world-class agricultural research and training centre operating up until the 1990s. In the early 2000s, it was in limbo, sometimes a hotel, sometimes a convention centre. I was very lucky to visit the place at the right time and be able to visit it in 2005 because you see there's more than one connection I have to this place. We will return to that story in another video. I'm at pains to add that the place is now private property, so please no visitors. However, there is a 100th anniversary celebration of Flock House being held this July in the thriving metropolis of Palmerston North. If you're connected with Flock House, whether you're descended from one of the original drafts or your connection comes from its later incarnation as a training centre, I would love to see you there. To purchase tickets or find out more, visit flockhouse.nz. That's flockhouse.nz. There is so much to be discovered on this journey, and I'm so happy that you're on it with me. If you like this video, please press like and subscribe to get notified of updates. I'm Suitauloa Simon Young, and thank you for learning history with me, one ancestor at a time.